Welcome to the Putting Your Business on the Map podcast. My name is Landon Blake. I am your podcast host. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the podcast. If you're curious and you'd like to learn more, we have a special page for the podcast up at www.landonblake.com. Make sure you check that out. We've got our show notes there. You can also download the podcast in your favorite audio format. You should also be able to find the podcast on Spotify and on YouTube. So we've got the podcast episodes in both of those places. So if you use one of those apps or services, you can subscribe to the podcast there. Full disclaimer, I record most of these episodes at my home in Stockton, California. I am married to a crazy Mexican woman, and I have 2 dogs, so you may hear her or the dogs during the podcast episode. I just want to warn you ahead of time. I love all 3 of them, but they are noisy. So if you would like to sponsor a private recording studio for the podcast, make sure you reach out to me and let me know that. Otherwise, you may have some background noise. So with that disclaimer out of the way, we're going to jump right into today's episode.
The title of this episode is When Should You Hire Your First Employee? When should you hire your second employee? Why are we talking about this today? Well, I got asked by a listener if I would do an episode on this topic, so I wanted to take care of that for him. I only have 2 or 3 listeners of the podcast, so yeah, I gotta take care of those people. So that's the main reason. It's a good topic, and so I wanted to put it in the schedule for him. And I will tell you right here at the beginning, sometimes I have a little disclaimer, so I'm going to give you my disclaimer. This was never really a question for me when I started RH with my partner Danny. So we knew we were going to have employees from the very beginning, and so we never really had to struggle with this question about if we should hire an employee or not. So we had a young lady that we worked with at a previous company, and she was fantastic, and we knew we wanted to take her with us when we started the business. If she decided to come, we wanted to take her, and she did decide to come, and she's been one of our longest. She's our longest full-time employee. So we never really struggled with this question, but I know that a lot of business owners do struggle with this, and so and it's important. So I wanted to talk about it. I also think there's a right way to do this and a wrong way. So there's a right way to hire employees and run a team, and there's a wrong way to do it, and there's good reasons to do it, and there's bad reasons to do it. So I thought we could try and talk about all that in today's episode. So why is this question important? Well, I think hiring your first team member is like crossing the Rubicon River. It's very hard to undo. I'm not saying you can't undo it, but there's some fixed costs to getting set up to have employees, and there's some also, if you're like me, you get emotionally attached to your workers, to your employees. They become like part of your family, and so it's really hard to just wake up one day and decide you don't want to have employees anymore. So you need to really think about it. It's a little bit like a point of no return. Now, the other reason it's important is this question, do I hire an employee? Do I hire my first employee? It's going to determine some important things about your business. So I've got 5 I wrote down. It's going to determine the size of your business, right? It's going to have an impact on your profitability. Number 3, it's going to determine the number of people you can help, both your clients and the people you help when you hire them and give them good jobs. So if you decide not to hire employees, you're going to help fewer people. That's just a reality. It is also going to impact the quality of your life. Now, I wanted to clarify that a little bit. That's number 4. It's going to have some determination on the quality of life you have. It doesn't mean hiring employees makes your quality of life better or worse, but it is a different quality of life and a different type of stress. So you're making some trades there. So, when you don't have employees, you have more control of your own destiny. You probably have a little more peace a little more peace and quiet. But you also don't get the satisfaction of helping your employees and helping your clients, helping more clients. So there's some trade-offs there. And then number 5, the answer to this question is going to determine how much, I think, in part, how much you grow and learn as a human being. So I would tell you that having employees, if you're a good boss, if you're a good person and you want to be a good boss, having employees is going to force you to grow and learn as a human being. And so if that's important to you, you got to think carefully about this question. Now, I will tell you, I don't think there's any other decision you can make that will fundamentally change your business like this decision. So if you do not currently have employees and you're trying to decide if you want to get your first employee, like this will forever change your life and your business. So it's like getting married. And I'm going to come back to that example a little later in the episode, but it is a life-altering decision, I think, if you want to do it well and if you care about people. Okay, so we know it's important. That's why we're talking about it. What are we going to talk about in the podcast today? I have 7 main points we're going to cover. So number 1, we're going to talk about some alternatives. So what are some other things you can do besides hiring your own employee? Number 2, we're going to talk about the wrong reasons to do this. So there are some reasons people do this, hire employees. I think they're the wrong reasons. I want to get that out of the way right at the beginning of the episode. Number 3, I'm going to tell you it's not as hard as you think, probably. Now I'm going to caveat that. It is hard to find, hire, and keep good people, but it's not for the reasons you think, probably. So I want to clarify that. Number 4, I'm going to talk about, if you decide to hire employees, what are the burdens that brings you as a business owner? There is a cost to it, and it's not just financial. There are other costs, so I want to talk about what the burdens are. Number 5, we're going to talk about the benefits. I personally think the benefits outweigh the burdens, but that's a decision you have to make based on your circumstances and values. Number 6, we'll talk about what are some signs that it's time for you to hire an employee. We've got 2 or 3 things. If you're seeing these in your life or your business, it may be time to hire an employee. And then finally, number 7, we'll talk about what are some of the rewards that come from hiring your first or second employee. Now, I split up rewards and benefits, and I did that for a reason. So the benefits we're going to talk about are tangible things that benefit or help your business. The rewards, I think, are more are deeper things, more emotional things that reward you as an individual and not just your business. So that's why I kept them separate. So that's what we're going to talk about. Those are the 7 main points. What are we not going to talk about today? There's a lot of things that we're not going to talk about that we need to maybe cover in future episodes. So one of those is we're not talking about how to hire people. That's hard. It's hard to hire good people. I am still working 4 years into this business on how to improve that. We're not talking about how to develop and train your new hires. That is another 1 or 2 episodes all by itself. And we're not talking about how to handle HR and labor compliance. So we're also not going to talk about how you handle human resources and labor compliance in a small business. Again, there's a lot there. That is another episode. So we won't talk about that today. All right, so we're going to dive into the first main point of the episode, and that is, what are some alternatives? Like I mentioned in the introduction, hiring your first employee is to some extent, it's a point of no return. It's going to fundamentally change your business and your life forever. So, that's a big commitment. What if you're not ready to do that yet? So there's some alternatives. We can talk about those. They have advantages and disadvantages, right? So there's trade-offs like everything else in life. So the first alternative is I'll just do everything myself, right? I'm the licensed surveyor. I'll do all of it. I'll do my own billing, my own drafting, my own bookkeeping, my own field work. That is a common model. I think it's probably more common in land surveying than it is in a lot of other types of businesses. So this is a really common model. I think that's partly because surveyors tend to be hermit-like. A lot of us are hermit-like, and we'd rather be outside than with people, so that we be part of it. And I have some of those tendencies myself. Certainly, if I had not married my wife, who's a very social and outgoing person, I would probably be way more of a hermit. I think that's how a lot of land surveyors start their own business. So I was kind of an anomaly. I started a business with a couple employees. That's not how most surveyors do it. Most surveyors start as solo practitioner. I think this alternative, this do everything myself alternative, is great for people that are control freaks, grouchy, mean, and or greedy. So if any of those, if those characteristics describe you, if you can check more than one of those boxes, this may be a good model for you. And I don't want to denigrate or knock that decision, that model. I think it can be extremely satisfying. And there is a place in the market for solo. There is a place in the market for solo survey practitioners. So I have a couple friends that run this model, and I respect them both very much. I think they're good surveyors, and I think they're both pretty happy individuals. They live a pretty good life. So, not saying you can't do it. So that's one alternative. The other alternative is to hire contract employees, or what we call 1099 employees. That reduces the level of commitment you have to make. It is somewhat more transactional, so you're probably not going to get some of the benefits that you get if you hire employees, but it also eliminates a lot of the burdens. So we're going to talk about some of the burdens. Running contract employees eliminates a lot of those. It is more expensive typically than hiring your own employees, because the person you're hiring as a contractor has to handle their own health insurance, taxes, that kind of thing. And so if they're smart about how they do that as an independent contractor, they're going to charge you more than they would if they were an employee. And it's a great way to add bandwidth or capability, especially over a short time period. So if you're not ready to make the long-term commitment to an employee, you can hire people on contract. Now, there are some trade-offs, right? Like I said, it's a little more transactional. You got to find those people. It can be hard to find contract employees that you trust. You got to monitor and manage their work. But that is an alternative. I would mention too, I didn't have this in my outline, but it may be a kind of a good stepping stone to have an employee, is to put somebody on contract first, so you can do that. And then kind of the last alternative is what I call just like doing this half-baked, and I think it's the worst of all of the three alternatives. So this is where you're going to hire somebody in-house, but you're going to treat them like a contractor. So you're not going to pay them as much as a contractor, but you're not going to train and develop them. You're not going to, work hard to make sure they have work they enjoy. You're going to treat them like a redheaded stepchild, or I think don't do that. It makes the world a worse place, and I don't think it's sustainable as a business, especially the type of work that we're doing. I don't even think it's a good idea when you're running a fast food restaurant, but I think it's a really bad idea when you're running a survey company. And I see people do this. What does this model look like? You're a solo practitioner. You hire a Rodman, let's say, you pay them minimum wage for your plan is to pay that person minimum wage for the rest of their life. You're not going to give them a lot of training. You're not going to give them a career path. You're not going to help them aspire to be something bigger or better. You're basically paying for a human robot. I don't like that model. And there's a lot of solo practitioners, when they hire their first employee, this is the model they run, right? And a lot of those guys go back to being a solo practitioner because they're like, oh, I hired my first employee and it was horrible. Well, yeah, it was horrible because you picked the worst, you didn't really do it right? You did it half-baked. You got all the downsides and none of the upsides that come with having a well-trained, loyal employee. So don't do that. Now, I will mention here, just kind of as a side note, and this needs to be a separate video, but there are laws you have to follow in the United States about who can be an employee and who can be an independent, what we call an independent contractor. And some businesses try and skirt those laws or break those rules because there are advantages to running an employee like they're an independent contractor. You see a lot of businesses do this. A lot of people will call me and ask me about it. Don't do it. We don't have anybody here at RH that should be an employee that is an independent contractor. Now, I do have a couple independent contractors that work for us. Actually, I have three. I have an IT guy, we have an HR guy, and I have a CPA, an accountant. They all run real businesses. So, now, they work for me on a contract basis, just like I work for other people on a contract basis, but they're not employees masquerading or pretending to be independent contractors. That can get you in a lot of trouble, and especially in a state like California. So don't be stupid and break the law in this way. All right, that brings us to the second main point I wanted to talk about. What are some bad reasons to hire your first employee? I've got 3. There's probably more, but I'm going to cover these 3 because I think these are the 3 most common reasons why I see people hire their first employee, and none of these are good reasons to do that. So the first bad reason to hire an employee is you want to delegate tasks you hate. Why is this a bad reason? It doesn't work very well. First of all, you need to understand that to really delegate most of the work you hate probably requires that you have a minimum size. And I don't know what that is, but it's probably around 5 or 6 people. So if you're just hiring your first employee, you might be able to delegate some of what you hate, but a lot of what you hate you're still going to keep. So hiring one person is probably not going to fix this. You're the boss, and what that means is there's a lot of things that you can't delegate until you're at a big enough size where you can hire a person that can specialize in those things you hate. There's some things. I've got 12 or 13 or 14 people. I don't know what the exact count is right now, but there's still a lot of things I got to do that I don't like because I'm the boss. Cash flow management, billing, a lot of business development. So I have 12 people and I still have to do some of that because some of those things are just important enough to need input from a principal or a boss. The other reason I think this doesn't work is if you want to have a good culture, you're going to lead by example. That's really important to us here at RH. We run a meritocracy, and one of our kind of foundational operating principles is that nobody's too good to chip in and help the team when it's needed. And I try and lead by example there. And my partners, my business partners also do that. So all of us do field work. We all will run a shovel or a chainsaw or a hatchet. When the janitor's on vacation, I'm the guy typically that vacuums and scrubs the toilets. I will clean a work truck. I will paint lath. So if you want to have that kind of organization, then hiring an employee because you want to give them all the crap jobs is not a good plan. The other reason this is a bad reason is because if you want to be a good boss, you want people to enjoy their jobs. So that means you either have to give them tasks that they will reasonably enjoy, or you have to hire people that will enjoy the things you hate. Now, sometimes that works. Sometimes you can find people that enjoy the things you hate. I have struggled with that a little bit. I find most of the people I hire really like to do the stuff I like to do, and that means I end up doing a lot of the stuff I hate. Now, I do have 2 wonderful business support employees, my HR person and my bookkeeper, that do a lot of the stuff that I don't like, and they're good at it. And so as I've gotten large enough to support those full-time business support roles, I have been able to do that. But it took a long time. There's still a lot of stuff I have to do on a weekly basis that I don't necessarily love. The second bad reason to hire your first team member is you want to boss people around. And that's not a good reason. What I would tell you is if you really want to boss people around, get a dog or maybe have kids. But don't hire employees. Most people don't like to be bossed around. Now, I'm not saying that a chain of command isn't important, that you don't need people to follow instructions, but if you just want to be bossy, you're not going to be a very good boss. And you're going to find that people don't work for you very long, I think, as a general rule. So don't hire people just because you want to boss somebody around. It's going to make you a really horrible boss. The third bad reason to hire your first team member is you want to run a sweatshop and you think cheap labor is the key to obtaining vast wealth. That's not going to work. If it was that easy, everybody would do it. It's not that easy. First of all, as I mentioned, it doesn't work well in our profession. So to be really profitable as a surveying and mapping consultant, I think you need to have smart people working for you. Smart people are not cheap. And again, I think even if you're running a mini mart or a fast food restaurant, running a sweatshop is not a key to long-term business success. We could talk about that in a different episode. And the other thing you have to remember is a lot of the costs of having employees evaporate whatever savings you think you're going to get. So, hiring employees and really seeing the benefit from that as a business financially, I think is a long-term game, not a short-term game, especially in something like land surveying. So, I would say as a general rule, the first year I have somebody on board this team, we are, they're not covering their wages. So it takes them about a year to get to the point where they can cover their own wages, and then I need another couple years before they really start to move the needle on profit. So those are long-term investments. All right, so don't hire your first employee for any of those reasons, right? You want to delegate tasks you hate, you want to boss people around, or you think having a sweatshop is going to make you independently wealthy, because I don't think any of those are good reasons. All right, that brings us to, I believe this is main point number 3, and that is hiring your first employee is probably not as hard as you think. I was really nervous when I started RH about hiring my first employee, and then I found out it wasn't hard for any of the reasons I thought. Now, I mentioned in the introduction, it was hard for other reasons, but not the reasons I thought. So let me tell you what is not hard about hiring employees in 2024. So payroll, taxes, labor compliance. Those were the things I was really scared about. You don't have to worry about that. There are specialized service providers now that take care of all of that. They make it super easy. You give them some basic information, they handle the rest. You don't got to worry about messing up your employees' payroll taxes. Now, I will tell you that the company that we started with was Gusto. We had a good experience with them. We don't use them anymore, but and they're not paying me for a promo. But we had a great experience with them. Check out Gusto or a similar service provider if you're thinking about hiring your first employee. They just make it so easy, and it's so affordable now. These companies are really good at it, and they do it at scale, which allows them to price it very reasonably. And they can do it for less money than you can do it. Absolutely. I almost guarantee. And they're going to do a better job. So payroll, taxes, labor compliance are not good reasons to avoid hiring your first team member. Now, I will tell you there are some setup costs and some fixed monthly costs. So it's part of the reason why, you got to think this through. So when you go to hire your first employee, you are going to have some setup costs, like, for example, developing a team manual. And there are some fixed monthly costs, so you have to, you do have to pay a fixed fee for every employee you have on payroll. But what that means is the second team member is easier to hire than the first, because once you've paid those setup costs, they're paid. So you will probably find after you've hired your first employee that it doesn't take you as long to hire your second employee, because you've already paid some of those costs, and you're going to find a reason to, there's a lower bar to get over to hire your second employee. So you'll probably do that more quickly than you did your first. Okay, now I'm not saying it isn't hard to have employees. It is hard. It's one of the hardest things about running a business. But it's not hard for the reasons you think, probably, right? It certainly wasn't for the reasons I thought. So all the things I thought were going to be hard ended up being easy, and then there were a bunch of things I didn't think about that ended up being hard. And I don't know if we're going to talk about it in this episode. Maybe we might a little bit, but I'll do another episode on what's hard, what are the hard parts about hiring and managing employees. Okay, so I do want to talk about some of the burdens that come with your first employee or your second employee, and I think there's five things. So let's talk about 5 things. So number 1, stressing about payroll. If you haven't yet, listen to the episode I did about cash flow management. I think it was episode 5. You hire employees, you've got employees and families that are counting on you to pay their bills. Now, that has a huge impact on me. I stress a lot about it because I really care about my people. If you're kind of the person who doesn't care about others, can't empathize, this won't be a problem for you, but then you're probably not going to be a very good boss. I really care about the people that work for me, and so I stress a lot about this. As I mentioned in the episode on cash flow, this is probably the one thing that causes me more stress than anything else, making sure I can pay my people on time. The second burden is training. So as soon as you hire your first employee, if you're going to do it right, I think in the land surveying and mapping professions, it requires you to do extensive training. Way more training than you probably realize. And even if you hire people with education or previous experience, you're still going to need to train them on your system and methods. So there is no solution to hire somebody that doesn't need to be trained. It doesn't work. I don't care who you hire. Now, we do more training than most companies because we tend to hire entry level, and we're trying to build a meritocracy, not a system that rewards credentials. But I think even if you are running a more traditional human resources model where you go out and hire, people with a bachelor's degree in land surveying or civil engineering, whatever. You don't underestimate the amount of training that you're going to have to do. They still have to learn how your business works and how you do things. And the other thing I was at is, your first hires are probably going to be entry level. So they're going to need more training. Typically the first hire a business makes is not at the senior level. Now, my business was different because one of my very first hires was my business partner, Danny, and he came on at a very high level. That is an exception, not the rule. And I had a guy that was willing to skip a paycheck if he needed to. So that's a little bit different. So typically, your first couple of hires as a new surveying business are going to be entry level. So that means they're going to need more training. All right, the third burden is babysitting. I struggled with what to call this, but I decided to call it babysitting. And what I would tell you is, if you're running a business, you're probably not 19, right? So I'm 45. My partners are both in that age range. And one of the things we've learned is, 25s and 45. We have a lot of young people working for us. And you have to watch those people. And I have good people working for me. We hire good people, but they're young. And so you have to watch them. You have to listen to them. You have to patiently teach them. Young and inexperienced people do dumb stuff. You got to put the guardrails up around them. That takes time. You also have to realize that mistakes are part of learning. You have to allow them to make mistakes, not mistakes that could crush your business, but small mistakes that they can learn from. That's not easy. It deserves its own episode. So you have to remember, you can't just hire employees and give them a day of training and put them on autopilot. That's a recipe for disaster. So when you hire employees, especially young employees, there is just a certain amount of babysitting that you have to do. And that takes time and it takes patience, and not everybody is cut for that. The fourth burden is parenting. Now it sounds like babysitting, but it's different. So what we found is a lot of the folks we hire, especially younger folks, they need to be taught life skills. And I'm not trying to be derogatory of the young people that work for us. We have really smart young folks that work for us. They're great. They're better than, I think, a lot of young folks. But we find we got to teach them life skills. What kind of things am I talking about? I had a young lady I hired. She had a bachelor's degree in geography from UC Santa Barbara here in California, and she was 25. Didn't know how to drive. I had to teach her how to drive, which was an interesting experience. But that was a life skill she needed that she didn't have. We talk to our young people a lot about saving money. They like to spend every dollar they get. That can be a bad thing when you work for surveying companies. So we talk to them a lot about saving money. We have to teach them about what behavior is appropriate in the workplace and what behavior isn't appropriate. So an example, I hired a young man. He'd worked for me before. Super good kid. Liked him a lot. He's in his mid-20s. Very first day on the job, walks in. He was familiar with one of my other younger female employees. Walked in, as soon as he saw her, gave her a big, full frontal hug. This particular young lady does not like to be touched, and I had known her since she was a little girl, and I don't hug her, and that's okay. So I kind of had to take him aside and knock him upside the head a little bit and say, hey, you're married, you're 28, or 26, you're a young man, not everybody is comfortable with that kind of touching. You need to think about it. The other thing, life skill, we got to talk sometimes to our folks about dress and grooming. Man, that's probably its own podcast episode. I have gotten more relaxed about dress and grooming over the last 4 years, but I am surprised at how young employees will dress. I interviewed a young lady a couple weeks ago, super smart, great personality. I'd love to hire her. She showed up for an interview for a professional position, and she was wearing blue jeans and tennis shoes. I would have never done that. But I think that's a little more typical. So, talking to you have to teach your folks, about, when you're going to go to court and testify, or you're going to go to a business meeting, what's appropriate dress and grooming. The other thing is, we're 65 to 75% female at Redefined Horizons, which is unusual for a surveying company. And occasionally, I have to remind my young female employees that I don't even though they think I'm old and I'm married, like I don't need to see their belly button or the top of their hips. Okay? Like keep your midriff covered. Um, I struggle with that a little bit. Like nobody had to teach me that stuff. No, I shouldn't say that. My parents taught me that stuff. My boss didn't need to teach me that, but some of the young people coming into the workforce, they haven't been taught, so you have to teach them. So there is a certain element of parenting that comes with hiring, especially if you're going to hire, people under the age of 30, that I wasn't expecting. It was a surprise to me. So you have to ask yourself, if you're going to hire employees, especially younger employees, are you prepared to be a parent? If you're not prepared to be a parent, maybe you don't want to hire employees. And then the last thing, the last burden, number 5, is just you have to fire people. I would say it's one of the hardest things I have to do as a business owner. I hate it. I hate doing it. It's never easy, no matter what the situation. But I've also realized in the last 4 years that it's a vitally important part of my job. So hanging on to an employee that you need to fire is super corrosive to your business. And so sometimes you got to man up or woman up and get it done. But it's hard, and I struggle with it, and I still struggle to do it well. All right, that's depressing, right? Those 5 things are depressing. So what are some benefits? I think if you hire the right people, it makes you more profitable. Even after you factor in all the costs of having employees, like training and the fixed costs. And one of the reasons why is it allows you as a land surveyor or mapping professional to focus on the tasks that are your highest value, right? And so when you do that, you're going to be more profitable. And I want to do a separate video, maybe on the whiteboard, where I walk through that math. But make a long story short, if you can bill out as a licensed land surveyor at $200 an hour, and you're doing CAD work that you can only bill out at $100 an hour, you're working for half your value, right? And so that's going to make you less profitable. So that's a benefit. The other benefit is improved quality. One of the other benefits, improved quality. There's no substitute for a second set of eyeballs. That was something I really worried about when I thought about starting my own business. And I would tell you, even if you've had a person that's been working for you for 3 months or 6 months, they're going to look at some of the work product and they're going to catch things that you don't catch. There is value to a second set of eyeballs. And the more experience that person gets, the more things they're going to catch, and the more they're going to improve your quality. So we work really hard here to teach people to peer review and to not let anything go out of this building to a client that hasn't had a peer review. I'm not saying that we're perfect at that, but we work hard at it. So that's a huge benefit, I think. You also, I think, if you hire the right kind of folks, you will get better at solving problems, solving your own organization's problems, and solving your clients' problems. Why is that? One reason is you're not as smart as you think you are, and the universe is constantly reminding me of that. And if you hire people that aren't exactly like you, you're going to find that they sometimes have innovative or ingenious solutions to problems that you would never think of because they aren't you. That's one really beautiful thing I like about Redefined Horizons is we have people from all kinds of different backgrounds and walks of life, and it helps us with our problem solving. And if you're not working at the low end of the market as a land surveyor or mapping professional, your clients are paying for you to solve their problems. So improving your ability to problem solve is going to make you a more successful business. And then the last thing is just scale. As you hire people, you will find that the sum of the parts is or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, 2 + 2 is going to equal 5 or 6, not 4. So there's just certain things that teams do that individuals do not do. There's some synergy that comes from a well-designed and functioning team. And so, if you have 3 or 4 people that have worked together for a long, long time, they are going to accomplish more with the same amount of time than 2 people with the same level of experience that have not worked before. And I see this when it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally I get to do field work with one of my 2 partners. And it's really a beautiful thing because, each one of us understands what needs to be done on the ground. We understand what the other guy is doing and what he's good at. And it's almost like watching a dance or a ballet. It just flows. There's just a flow. And it's a really beautiful thing. I don't even think you appreciate it if you haven't been doing it for decades. And I enjoy those moments when I get to work with my two business partners in the field and things just run like that. It's a really beautiful thing. So you never get to experience that if you don't have a team that you've put time into developing. All right, the next point I wanted to cover is just 3 signs it's time to hire your first team member. So, if you're out there and you're a solo practitioner, I don't know, maybe your nephew's helping you with some field work or your wife's doing your books, but you're thinking, yeah, I don't know, I think it might be time to hire my first employee. What are some signs? I'm going to give you 3. There's more, but I'll give you 3. 1, you're always tired. That probably means you're being overworked. It also leads to more mistakes. So if you're always tired, that might be a sign you need to get some help. Number 2, you can't keep up. You can't keep up with your jobs, can't keep up with your billing. Bad client service is corrosive if you want a quality client base. So you need to really take a look at that. What I would tell you is if you're not getting paid on time because you're not getting your bills out on time, that is a really strong indicator that you need help. I would say it's the number 1 indicator. So ask yourself, am I getting paid on time? If the answer is no, and you know it's your fault, you need help. So you should really think about that. And then the third thing is, you're making mistakes. So if you're making a lot of mistakes, that's going to prevent good long-term client relationships, and that means you need that second set of eyeballs. Even if it's a Rodman or a Cat Tech, you need to start teaching somebody to look at your product and catch problems. So there you go. If you see one of those 3 things, you're always tired, you can't keep up, you're making mistakes, you probably need help. You probably need to hire an employee. So if you can check more than one of those boxes, I would encourage you to really think about it. All right, the last thing is, the last main point, number 7, is what are the rewards that come from hiring your first employee or second employee? And this is really important. That's why I kept it separate from the benefits. So I'm going to tell you, for me, what I found the rewards are. 1 is it provides me with a real sense of purpose. There's some parts of my job I really don't like. This last week I had to deal with some people that were rude, opinionated, arrogant, not that worked for me, clients and folks that we're working with on projects. And I really don't like that part of my job. But part of the reason I do that, and my partners do it, is because we know that because we do that, our team members have a safe place to work, and a rewarding place to work. To some extent, they come here and they don't have to deal with that part of the world, right? Because the principals are doing that. We to some extent, we shield them from that. And they get to just come here and have a really enjoyable job in a safe place. And that gives us, it gives me for sure a sense of purpose. I think it does my partners too, if you ask them. So we take a lot of pride in providing people with a safe place that's a great place to work. We also take real pride in the growth of our team and our team members, so watching them develop and grow is one of the most deeply satisfying things about being a business owner. I mean, for me, that is the one thing that makes it worth the hassle and the stress, is I think people come here and have a chance to develop and grow in a way they don't at other places, and I'm super proud of them for that. And then the last reward is, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but when you decide to hire employees and if you want to work on being a good leader and a good boss, you're going to grow as a human being. It's going to make you a better person. Now, the downside to that is you're going to see the way you fail. And I would say my biggest failures at Redefine Horizons are typically in the people part. It's the hardest part, one of the hardest parts, and I don't always do it. I make mistakes with my people sometimes, and those are mistakes I deeply regret. And that's painful. It's almost so painful that it makes me think I wish I wouldn't have employees, because then I wouldn't have to see myself fail like this. But I don't think that's the right answer. Those failures help me to grow and to be a better person, not just at work as a boss, but outside of work, be a better person. And I tell people it's like a successful marriage. Marriage is really hard. That's why a lot of them don't last. But if you work hard to have a good marriage, you learn to listen, you learn to be patient, you learn to compromise, you learn to put another person's needs ahead of your own. And I think being married for a long time if you're in a successful marriage, that makes you a better person in the rest of your life. I know certainly being married to my wife, Monique, has made me a much better person. So I think being a boss is like that. If you're working really hard to be a good boss, you're going to fail. Those failures are hard, at least they are for a person like me, because I'm proud. But learning to be a good boss is going to make you a better human being too. So it's painful, but it's important growth, I think. So to review, what did we talk about in the episode today? We talked about, number one, the alternatives to hiring your first employee. 2, the wrong reasons to hire. Remember, we talked about 3 of them. Number 3, we talked about it's probably not as hard to hire your first employee for the reasons you think. So payroll, labor compliance, taxes. There's companies that will take care of all that for you. 4, we talked about some of the burdens that come with having employees, right? Parenting, babysitting, training, firing people. But we talked about the benefits, right? You get to be more profitable, you get to scale, you can help more people. We talked about 3 signs that you might need to hire your first employee. And then we just talked about some of the rewards, personal rewards that come from being a good boss with employees. So in the next episode, I am going to talk about how you can create a strategic plan and a tactical plan for your surveying or mapping organization. Could be a business or government agency, nonprofit. We'll talk about that. I'll walk you guys through my strategic plan template. I don't know if we'll get to both of them, strategic plan and tactical plan, but I'm going to try and do that. And we're going to work through an example. So I'm excited about that. Look forward to it. Appreciate you guys listening to this episode. I hope you enjoy the podcast. I will mention here at the end, if you sell a product or service for land surveyors or mapping professionals, a quality product or service, and you would like to sponsor the podcast and have me talk about that a little bit, I'm entertaining the idea of getting a podcast sponsor. I have hired somebody to help me proofread and edit the podcast and do the show notes. And so if you would like to sponsor and help cover some of that cost for me, I would appreciate it. And you could get your message out to the 5 people that listen to this podcast. So you just reach out to me. I'm on the web, landonblake.com. You can find my contact info. And you never know. Maybe we'll pick up a sponsor for the podcast. Even if we don't, I'll keep recording the episodes because I think it's important. So appreciate you guys listening, and we hope we get to visit with you some more on our next episode. That episode is going to be about creating strategic plans and tactical plans.
That's going to wrap up our episode for today. Once again, I want to thank you guys for listening. Appreciate that. Don't forget, you can check out the podcast, download episodes, view show notes at www.landonblake.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or you have a suggestion for a future topic for an episode, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can find my contact information all over the web. Landon Blake, I'd love to hear from you, and we will catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks.